Ethan Blake was tired, the kind of tired that no amount of coffee or deep breaths could fix. His day had started before sunrise, with back-to-back meetings at the sleek glass building where his tech company was headquartered. By late afternoon, he'd already signed off on 2 major deals and fired an underperforming manager. Now, as he drove home along the winding highway, all he wanted was to see his daughter Lily, tuck her into bed, and maybe, just maybe, sit down for 5 minutes without someone needing something from him. The road ahead was dark, illuminated only by the headlights of his car and the occasional glow of distant streetlights. It was one of those quiet nights where everything felt still, like the world had gone to sleep except for him. Ethan glanced at the clock on his dashboard. Nearly 10 o'clock. Lily would be asleep by now, but he'd promised her he'd read her a bedtime story tonight. He sighed, feeling guilty about breaking yet another promise. Being a single dad and running a company wasn't easy, but it was his life, and he did his best. As he rounded a bend in the road, something caught his eye, a flicker of orange light near the shoulder. At first he thought it might just be reflections from passing cars, but then he saw it clearly, smoke rising thick and black against the night sky. Slowing down, Ethan pulled onto the gravelly edge of the highway. Whatever it was, it didn't look good. Parking his car a safe distance away, Ethan stepped out and immediately smelled burning rubber and gasoline. The acrid scent filled the air, making his eyes water. Up ahead, partially hidden by bushes, was a luxury sedan engulfed in flames. The fire crackled and roared, sending sparks flying into the darkness. For a moment, Ethan froze, unsure of what to do. Then he heard it, a faint scream coming from inside the car. Without thinking, Ethan ran toward the inferno. The heat hit him like a wall, forcing him to shield his face with his arm. Peering through the flames, he realized the worst part. The driver's door was chained shut, and inside, struggling desperately, was a woman. Her hands were bound to the steering wheel with heavy metal chains, and panic twisted her features as she screamed for help. "Hang on!" Ethan shouted, though. He wasn't sure she could hear him over the roar of the fire. He sprinted back to his car and yanked open the trunk, rummaging until he found a small fire extinguisher. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Clutching it tightly, he returned to the burning vehicle, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The window was halfway down, giving him just enough space to aim the extinguisher. He sprayed furiously, trying to create a gap in the flame so he could get closer. His heart pounded as sweat dripped down his forehead. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the flames died down enough for him to grab hold of the window frame and pull himself closer. "Keep calm," he yelled, leaning in. "I'm going to get you out." The woman nodded weakly, tears streaming down her soot-streaked face. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Please, hurry." Ethan scanned the situation quickly. The chains were too thick for him to break with his bare hands, but there was a pocket knife clipped to his belt loop. With shaking fingers, he unfolded the blade and began sawing at the links. Sparks flew as the metal grated against the knife, each second stretching longer than the last. Behind him, the fire continued to rage, threatening to consume them both. Finally, with one last desperate tug, the chain snapped. Ethan reached in, grabbed the woman under her arms, and hauled her out of the car just as the entire thing erupted in a deafening explosion. The force of the blast knocked them both to the ground, and Ethan instinctively covered the woman with his body, shielding her from flying debris. For a few moments, neither of them moved. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of charred metal. Slowly, Ethan pushed himself up, coughing violently. Beside him, the woman lay trembling, clutching her chest as if trying to steady her breathing. Her clothes were singed and her skin bore angry red marks from the heat, but she was alive. "You okay?" Ethan asked hoarsely, helping her sit up. She nodded, though her wide eyes betrayed her fear. Up close, he could see that she was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe mid-20s with matted blonde hair and striking green eyes. Despite the dirt and ash covering her face, there was something undeniably beautiful about her. I think so," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for saving me." Ethan offered her a reassuring smile, though he felt anything but calm. Don't mention it. What happened here? Who did this to you? She hesitated, glancing nervously over her shoulder as if expecting someone or something to appear. I don't know, I can't remember. Her answer confused him, but before he could press further, the sound of approaching sirens broke the silence. Emergency vehicles were on their way, their flashing lights visible in the distance. Ethan helped the woman to her feet and guided her toward his car, knowing they needed to get away from the wreckage before authorities arrived. Back at his vehicle, Ethan retrieved a blanket from the trunk and wrapped it around her shoulders. She clutched it tightly, shivering despite the warmth of the night. As they drove away from the scene, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than she was letting on. Something about her demeanor, the way she kept looking over her shoulder, the tension in her voice, told him this wasn't just some random accident. My name's Ethan, by the way, he said, breaking the silence. Ethan Blake. She glanced at him briefly before looking away again. Claire Harper. Well, Claire Harper, we'll figure this out together, but first, let's get you somewhere safe. By the time they reached Ethan's house, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving him drained. He ushered Claire inside, where Lily sat curled up on the couch watching cartoons. At the sight of the strange woman wrapped in a blanket, Lily's eyes widened with curiosity. Who's that, Dad? She asked, pointing at Claire. This is Claire, Ethan explained gently. She's had a rough night, so we're going to take care of her, okay? Lily nodded solemnly, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. Okay. As Ethan settled Claire into the guest room, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of trouble they'd just stumbled into. One thing was certain: their lives were about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling groggy and disoriented. The events of the previous night played over in his mind like a movie reel. Flames, screams, chains, and Claire's terrified face. He sat up in bed, rubbing his temples as he tried to make sense of it all. What had happened to her? Who would chain someone inside a car and set it on fire? And why did she seem so reluctant to talk about it? Downstairs, the smell of pancakes wafted through the air. Ethan followed the scent into the kitchen, where he found Lily standing on a stool, flipping pancakes with surprising skill for an 8-year-old. Claire sat at the table, wearing one of Ethan's oversized sweatshirts and sipping a cup of coffee. She looked better than she had last night. Her hair was combed, her cuts cleaned, and some color had returned to her cheeks, but there was still a shadow of fear in her eyes. Morning, Dad, Lily chirped, holding up a plate stacked high, with golden pancakes. I made breakfast. Ethan smiled, grateful for the distraction. Looks amazing, Lil. Thanks. He poured himself a cup of coffee and joined Claire at the table. For a moment they ate in silence, the only sounds being the clink of forks against plates and Lily humming softly to herself. Finally, Ethan decided to broach the subject. Claire, he began cautiously. Do you remember anything else about what happened last night? She froze mid-bite, her fork hovering above her plate. After a long pause, she shook her head. No. I'm sorry. It's all blurry. Her voice was calm, but Ethan noticed the way her hands trembled slightly as she set the fork down. Something wasn't adding up. He wanted to press further, but before he could say anything, Lily piped up. Are you staying here now? She asked innocently, tilting her head to look at Claire. Claire blinked, caught off guard by the question. I don't know yet. Well, you can stay as long as you need to, Ethan said firmly, meeting her gaze. You're safe here. For a brief moment, gratitude flickered across her face, but it was quickly replaced by unease. She glanced toward the window, her expression darkening as if expecting trouble to come knocking at any second. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself pacing in his home office. His laptop was open on his desk, displaying the results of a quick, online search he'd done on Claire Harper. So far, nothing useful had turned up, not even a social media profile or news article. It was as if she didn't exist. Normally, this wouldn't have bothered him, but given the circumstances, it felt suspicious. As he mulled over the mystery, his phone buzzed on the desk. Picking it up, he saw a text from his business partner, Ryan. "Hey man, everything okay? Heard about a car explosion near your route last night. You good?" Ethan hesitated before replying. "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired." He debated whether to mention Claire but decided against it. If word got out that he'd brought a stranger into his home, a stranger involved in something dangerous, it could put them all at risk. Putting the phone aside, Ethan leaned back in his chair and sighed. He needed answers, and sitting around waiting for Claire to open up wasn't going to cut it. He grabbed his jacket and headed downstairs. "I'm going out for a bit," he told Claire, who was sitting on the couch reading a book Lily had lent her. "Will you be okay here with Lily?" She nodded, though her grip on the book tightened slightly. "Of course. Thank you again, for everything." Ethan forced a smile. Don't mention it. His first stop was the local police station. He figured reporting the incident might shed some light on what had happened. But when he explained the situation to the officer at the front desk, the man's reaction was less than helpful. "A burning car with a chained-up woman?" the officer repeated skeptically, raising an eyebrow. "That sounds pretty far-fetched, Mr. Blake. Are you sure you didn't misinterpret what you saw?" Ethan bristled. "I know what I saw. I pulled her out myself. You think I'd make something like that up?" The officer shrugged. "Look, without evidence or witnesses, there's not much we can do. Maybe she wandered off after you saved her. Happens all the time." Frustrated, Ethan left the station empty-handed. As he drove home, he realized he couldn't rely on the authorities for help. If Claire was in danger, and judging by her behavior, she clearly was, it was up to him to protect her. Back at the house, things seemed quiet. Claire was helping Lily with a puzzle on the living room floor, the two of them laughing as they fit pieces together. Watching them interact, Ethan felt a pang of guilt. Bringing Claire into their lives had been the right thing to do, but he couldn't shake the nagging worry that he might be putting his daughter in harm's way. That evening, after tucking Lily into bed, Ethan sat down with Claire in the kitchen. He poured them both cups of tea and decided to try a different approach. "Listen," he said gently, "you don't have to tell me everything, but if someone's after you or if you're in trouble, I need to know. I can't help you if I don't understand what's going on." Claire stared into her cup, her fingers tracing the rim nervously. For a moment, Ethan thought she might refuse to answer. Then she spoke, her voice barely audible. "They'll kill me if they find me," she whispered. "And they won't stop there. They'll hurt anyone who tries to help me." Ethan's stomach churned. "Who are they?" She hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. "My family." The admission hit him like a punch to the gut. Family? He'd expected criminals, kidnappers, maybe even terrorists. But family? It didn't make sense. "My father," she continued, her voice trembling. "He's powerful, rich, connected. He runs a company, a pharmaceutical company. On the surface, it looks legitimate, but underneath..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Let's just say not everything is as it seems." Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What does your father want with you?" Claire took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Years ago, I found out things I wasn't supposed to know, things about experiments, human trials, people disappearing. When I confronted him, he told me to keep quiet. I couldn't. I ran. Changed my name, moved cities, tried to disappear. But no matter where I went, they always found me." Her words sent chills down Ethan's spine. Human experimentation? Disappearances? This wasn't just dangerous, it was monstrous. And now, somehow, he and Lily were caught in the middle of it. "What about the car?" he asked. "How did you end up chained inside?" Claire's hands clenched into fists. "I don't know how they caught me. One minute I was walking home, the next, I woke up in the car. They must have drugged me. I don't remember anything until I heard the engine catch fire." Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This was worse than he'd imagined. Whoever these people were, they weren't messing around. And if they came looking for Claire, they wouldn't hesitate to hurt anyone who got in their way. "We'll figure this out," he said firmly, though doubt gnawed at him. "Together." Claire looked at him, her green eyes filled with a mixture of hope and despair. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." Ethan met her gaze steadily. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because no one deserves to live like this." For the first time since he'd met her, Claire smiled. A small, fragile smile, but a smile nonetheless. In that moment, Ethan vowed to protect her no matter the cost. Over the next few days, Ethan threw himself into finding a solution. He installed security cameras around the house and hired private investigators to dig deeper into Claire's story. Meanwhile, Claire stayed close to home, rarely venturing outside. Despite her gratitude, she remained guarded, flinching at every unfamiliar sound or knock on the door. One evening, while checking the footage from the cameras, Ethan spotted something unsettling. A black SUV had parked across the street earlier that day and hadn't moved since. Its windows were tinted too dark to see inside, but Ethan knew instinctively that it wasn't there by coincidence. His suspicions were confirmed later that night when he received an anonymous email. The message was short and chilling. "Stay out of things you don't understand. Let her go or you'll regret it." Ethan stared at the screen, his heart pounding. They were watching him, watching them. Whoever they were, they weren't going to let Claire slip away easily. As he deleted the email, Ethan realized the stakes had just gotten higher. Protecting Claire wasn't going to be enough. They needed a plan, a way to fight back. But how could they possibly stand against someone with resources, connections, and no moral limits? Little did Ethan know the hardest part of their journey was yet to come. The days that followed were tense. Ethan could feel the weight of danger pressing down on them like a storm cloud ready to burst. The black SUV remained parked across the street, its presence a constant reminder that they were being watched. Claire barely left her room, spending most of her time staring out the window or pacing nervously. Lily, sensing the tension in the house, stuck close to Ethan, asking fewer questions but watching everything with wide, curious eyes. Ethan knew they couldn't keep living this way, waiting for something to happen, waiting for them to strike. He needed to take control of the situation, but he didn't know where to start. One thing was clear: running wasn't an option. If Claire's father was as powerful as she claimed, they'd never be able to outrun him forever. They needed a plan, a smart one. Late one night, after tucking Lily into bed, Ethan sat down with Claire in the dimly lit kitchen. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of tea. Ethan placed a folder on the table between them. Inside were printouts from the private investigators he'd hired, details about Claire's family, their company, and whispers of illegal activities buried deep within financial records and news articles. "I think I found something," Ethan said quietly, pushing the folder toward her. "Your father's company, Monroe Pharmaceuticals, it's tied to some shady stuff. There are rumors about secret labs, experimental drugs, and people disappearing after volunteering for trials." Claire nodded slowly, her expression grim. "I told you, that's why I ran." "But there's more," Ethan continued. "One of the investigators tracked down former employees who quit under mysterious circumstances. Some of them mentioned a project called Genesis. Ever heard of it?" Claire's face went pale. "Genesis, yes. It's what started all of this." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They weren't just testing drugs. They were altering DNA, trying to create superhumans, I guess. People who could heal faster, live longer, resist diseases. But it came at a cost. Some subjects died, others changed in ways no one expected." Ethan leaned back in his chair, processing what she'd said. "If we can prove this, if we can expose it, we might be able to bring your father down. Once the truth is out, even his connections won't protect him." Claire shook her head, fear flashing in her eyes. "You don't understand. My father doesn't play by the rules. Even if you expose him, he'll find a way to silence anyone who tries, and he won't stop until everyone involved is dead, including you, me, and Lily." Her words hung heavy in the air, but Ethan refused to let fear dictate their next move. Then we'll make sure we're smarter than him. We'll gather evidence, build a case, and leak it to the press. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. Claire hesitated, torn between hope and dread. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but we need help. Someone who knows how to handle this kind of thing. That's when Ethan remembered Mia Torres, an old college friend who worked as an investigative journalist. Known for exposing corporate corruption, Mia had a reputation for being fearless and resourceful. If anyone could help them, it was her. The next morning, Ethan called Mia and arranged to meet her at a quiet cafe downtown. When he arrived, Mia was already seated at a corner table, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked up as he approached, her sharp brown eyes lighting up with recognition. Ethan Blake. Long time no see, she said, standing to hug him. What brings you here? Last I heard you were busy running your empire. Ethan forced a smile as he sat down. It's complicated. Listen, Mia, I need your help with something big, something dangerous. Mia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Dangerous? Now you've got my attention. For the next hour, Ethan explained everything. Claire's story, the burning car, the threats, and the connection to Monroe Pharmaceuticals. At first, Mia listened skeptically, but as Ethan laid out the evidence, her expression grew serious. This sounds insane, she admitted, flipping through the documents Ethan had brought. But if it's true, it could be the biggest story of the decade. Where's Claire now? She's safe, at least for now, Ethan replied. But we're running out of time. Whoever's behind this knows we're onto them. Mia tapped her fingers against the table, thinking. All right, here's what we'll do. You and Claire stay low. I'll dig deeper into Monroe Pharmaceuticals and see if I can confirm these allegations. If we can get solid proof, I'll publish it everywhere. Newspapers, TV, social media. There's no way they'll be able to cover it up. Relief washed over Ethan. For the first time in days, he felt like they had a fighting chance. Thank you, Mia. I owe you one. Just promise me you'll keep yourself and that little girl of yours safe, Mia said firmly. This isn't going to be easy. Back at home, Ethan filled Claire in on the plan. To his surprise, she seemed less afraid and more determined. If this works, it'll finally put an end to everything, she said. My brother, he was one of the first test subjects. He didn't survive. I promised myself I'd make sure no one else suffered like he did. Her words struck a chord with Ethan. This wasn't just about saving themselves anymore, it was about justice, about stopping a monster before he could destroy more lives. Over the next few days, Ethan worked tirelessly to create a fake digital trail suggesting Claire had fled the country. Using his tech expertise, he planted false travel records, credit, card transactions, and even a fake passport application, all pointing to Europe. The goal was simple: distract Monroe's team long enough for Mia to gather concrete evidence. Meanwhile, Claire began opening up more, sharing fragments of her past with Ethan. She talked about growing up in luxury but feeling trapped, about the guilt of leaving her younger brother behind, and about the years she spent hiding, always looking over her shoulder. As they spent more time together, Ethan found himself drawn to her strength and resilience. Despite everything she'd been through, she hadn't given up. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Claire turned to Ethan. Why are you really doing this? She asked softly. You barely know me, yet you're risking everything. Ethan met her gaze, his heart pounding. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I believe in second chances. And because... He hesitated, unsure how to finish. Because I care about you. Claire's eyes softened, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then she reached out, placing her hand on his. Thank you, Ethan. For everything. Their fragile peace was shattered 2 nights later. Ethan was in his office reviewing security footage when he noticed movement outside. 2 men dressed in dark clothing were creeping toward the house, their faces obscured by masks. Panic surged through him as he realized they'd been found. Claire! He shouted, rushing upstairs. We need to go, now! Within minutes, they had grabbed Lily and fled into the woods behind the house, sticking to the shadows as distant shouts echoed through the night. Behind them, the sound of breaking glass signaled that the intruders had broken in. Ethan cursed, under his breath, clutching Lily's hand tighter as they ran. They eventually reached an abandoned cabin deep in the forest, where they huddled together, listening for any sign of pursuit. For hours they stayed silent, the only sound the rustling of leaves in the wind. Exhausted and scared, Lily fell asleep in Ethan's arms, leaving him and Claire alone with their thoughts. "We can't keep running," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "Sooner or later they'll catch us." Ethan nodded grimly. "Then we fight back." By morning, Ethan had devised a new plan. With Mia's help, they would set a trap for Monroe's team, luring them to a remote location where local law enforcement could intervene. It was risky, but it was their best shot. As the sun rose over the horizon, Ethan looked at Claire and Lily, determination hardening in his chest. No matter what happened next, he vowed to protect them, to ensure they made it out alive. The plan was set, but the weight of it pressed heavily on Ethan's shoulders. He knew they were walking into dangerous territory, but there was no other choice. If they wanted to end this nightmare, they had to take a stand. With Claire and Lily by his side, he felt both terrified and determined. They couldn't keep running forever. Early that morning, Ethan contacted Mia again, updating her on their situation. She agreed to meet them at the remote warehouse they'd chosen as the trap location, a place far enough from town to avoid civilian interference, but close enough for law enforcement to respond quickly. Mia promised to bring backup, including a trusted colleague who specialized in covert operations. Together, they would gather evidence and ensure Monroe's team was caught red-handed. As they prepared to leave the cabin, Claire helped Ethan pack supplies while Lily clung to her father's leg. "Are we going to be okay, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Ethan knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We're going to do everything we can to make sure of it, sweetheart. Just stay close to me, all right?" Lily nodded, though her wide eyes betrayed her fear. Claire stepped forward, offering a reassuring smile. "We'll get through this together," she said softly, placing a hand on Lily's shoulder. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself to believe it might actually work. When they arrived at the warehouse, the air was thick with tension. The building stood alone in the middle of an empty field, its windows boarded up and its walls covered in graffiti. It wasn't much, but it would serve their purpose. Inside, Mia and her colleague Alex were already waiting, armed with recording equipment and communication devices. "All right, here's the plan," Mia began, spreading out a map on a dusty table. "We've planted fake intel suggesting Claire is hiding here. Monroe's men will come looking for her. When they arrive, we'll document everything, conversations, actions, anything that proves their involvement in illegal activities. Once we have enough evidence, we call in the police. And if things go wrong?" Ethan asked, his voice tight with worry. Mia exchanged a glance with Alex before answering. "Then we improvise, but don't worry, we've got your back." Claire nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "Let's just hope this works." They positioned themselves strategically around the warehouse, using hidden cameras and microphones to monitor every angle. Ethan stayed near the entrance with Lily, keeping her tucked behind a stack of crates. Claire took cover deeper inside, ready to play her part as bait. Mia and Alex manned the surveillance equipment, ensuring they captured every detail. Hours passed in tense silence. The only sounds were the occasional creak of the old building and the distant hum of insects outside. Just as doubt began creeping into Ethan's mind, headlights pierced through the darkness. A black van pulled up outside, followed by two SUVs identical to the one that had been parked across from Ethan's house. "They're here," Mia whispered urgently into her headset. Ethan's heart raced as he watched 6 men step out of the vehicles, all dressed in tactical gear and carrying weapons. They moved with precision, scanning the area before entering the warehouse. One of them barked orders into a radio, confirming they were expecting to find Claire. Inside, Claire held her breath as the men approached. She could hear their boots echoing against the concrete floor, growing louder with each passing second. Finally, one of them spotted her, shouting, "There she is, grab her!" Before they could reach her, Ethan burst out from his hiding spot, aiming a flashlight directly at their faces. "Stay back," he yelled, his voice firm despite the fear coursing through him. The men froze, momentarily blinded by the light. Seizing the opportunity, Mia activated a loud alarm system she'd rigged throughout the warehouse. The sudden noise disoriented the intruders, giving Ethan and Claire precious seconds to retreat further into the building. "You're not taking her," Ethan shouted, stepping protectively in front of Claire. Behind him, Lily clutched his jacket, tightly, tears streaming down her face. One of the men smirked, lowering his weapon slightly. "This doesn't have to get messy, Blake. Hand her over and you walk away." Ethan shook his head, defiance burning in his eyes. Not a chance. The standoff lasted only moments before chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out, though none of the attackers dared to fire directly, knowing the presence of a child complicated matters. Instead, they advanced cautiously, attempting to flank Ethan and Claire. Meanwhile, Mia and Alex worked frantically to record everything, capturing clear footage of the men identifying themselves as agents of Monroe Pharmaceuticals. Suddenly, Victor Monroe himself appeared, striding confidently into the warehouse. His sharp suit and polished shoes seemed out of place amidst the grime and disorder. In his hand, he held a briefcase. "Enough of this," Monroe snapped, his voice cold and commanding. "Claire, come with me now or I'll burn this entire place to the ground with everyone inside." Claire stepped forward, her expression hardening. "You won't win, Father," Monroe sneered, opening the briefcase to reveal stacks of documents and flash drives. "These contain everything you've been so desperate to hide. The experiments, the disappearances, the deaths. Without them, your little rebellion means nothing." Realization dawned on Ethan. Those files were the key to exposing Monroe's crimes. If they could get their hands on them, they'd have undeniable proof. Seizing the moment, Claire lunged at her father, knocking the briefcase from his grasp. Papers scattered across the floor as the two struggled, years of resentment and pain boiling over. Ethan rushed to help, tackling one of the guards who tried to intervene. The fight became a blur of fists, shouts, and scuffling feet. Amidst the chaos, Mia signaled for Alex to contact the authorities. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing louder as police cars sped toward the scene. Seeing the approaching lights, Monroe's men panicked, abandoning their posts and fleeing into the night. Only Monroe remained, cornered and furious. "You think this changes anything?" he spat, glaring at Claire. "I built an empire. Do you really believe a few pieces of paper will bring me down?" "It's not just the papers," Claire replied, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "It's the truth. And the truth always finds a way." As officers stormed the warehouse, Ethan wrapped an arm around Claire, pulling her close. Lily clung to his leg, sobbing quietly but safe. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to breathe. Later that night, as they sat in the back of a police car watching Monroe being led away in handcuffs, Ethan felt a mix of relief and exhaustion wash over him. The battle was far from over. There would be trials, investigations, and media scrutiny, but they had taken the first crucial step toward justice. Claire leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, her body shaking. With quiet sobs, "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me, for fighting for me." Ethan kissed the top of her head, holding her tighter. Always. In the distance, dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a new day full of uncertainty but also hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Weeks passed after the night at the warehouse, and life began to settle into a fragile kind of normalcy for Ethan, Claire, and Lily. Victor Monroe was behind bars, awaiting trial for his role in illegal human experimentation, corporate fraud, and countless other crimes. The evidence Mia and Alex had gathered, along with the documents recovered from the briefcase, was enough to implicate not only Monroe, but also several high-ranking officials within his company. News outlets couldn't stop talking about it, calling it one of the biggest scandals in modern history. For Claire, the aftermath was bittersweet. On one hand, justice was finally being served. Her father's empire was crumbling, and the truth about his monstrous experiments was out in the open. On the other hand, she carried the weight of everything she'd lost: the brother who hadn't survived, the years spent running, and the guilt of knowing she could have done more sooner. But amidst the pain, there was healing too. For the first time in her life, she felt free. Ethan noticed the change in her almost immediately. She smiled more often now, her laughter filling their home with warmth. She even started helping Lily with her schoolwork, teaching her math tricks and reading bedtime stories every night. Watching them together, Ethan realized how much Claire had come to mean to both him and his daughter. Without realizing it, she had become part of their family. The trial against Victor Monroe dragged on for months, drawing national attention. Claire testified in court, her voice steady as she recounted the horrors she'd witnessed. It wasn't easy. Monroe glared at her from across the room, his cold eyes filled with hatred. But she stood firm, refusing to let fear silence her. When the verdict came down, guilty on all charges, Claire broke down in tears, overwhelmed by relief. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, asking questions about her ordeal, but she simply held Ethan's hand and walked away. That evening, they celebrated quietly at home. Ethan cooked spaghetti while Claire baked chocolate chip cookies, the smell of garlic and sugar mingling in the air. Lily sat at the table coloring pictures, occasionally bursting into giggles when cookie dough ended up on Ethan's nose or Claire's cheeks. It was a simple moment, but it felt perfect. "Do you think he'll ever get out?" Lily asked suddenly, looking up from her drawing. Ethan paused, unsure how to answer. "Not anytime soon," he said gently. "He made some very bad choices, and now he has to face the consequences." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Good. He doesn't deserve to be free." Claire reached over and squeezed Lily's hand. "You're right. And because of brave people like your dad, we don't have to worry about him anymore." Lily grinned proudly, sticking out her chest like a superhero. "Yeah, Daddy's the best." They all laughed, the sound echoing through the cozy kitchen. For the first time in what felt like forever, they weren't afraid of tomorrow. As weeks turned into months, Claire began rebuilding her life. With Ethan's encouragement, she enrolled in community college studying psychology so she could help others who had gone through trauma. She still struggled with nightmares and anxiety, but having a purpose gave her strength. Ethan supported her every step of the way, cheering her on during exams and celebrating small victories like acing a test or giving a presentation without panicking. Their relationship deepened too. What had started as gratitude and mutual trust blossomed into something stronger. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan turned to Claire and took her hand. "I know things haven't been easy," he began, his voice soft but sincere. "But I want you to know, I'm glad you're here. I can't imagine our lives without you." Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I feel the same way," she admitted. "You've given me a second chance at life, at happiness. I'll never be able to thank you enough." "You already have," Ethan replied, pulling her closer. "Just by being here, for me, for Lily. You've given us so much." They kissed. Under the fading light, the world around them peaceful and quiet. Inside, Lily peeked out the window, smiling knowingly before returning to her book. She liked Claire a lot, and secretly hoped she'd stick around forever. By spring, things were falling into place. Ethan decided to step back from his role as CEO, handing over day-to-day operations to Ryan and focusing instead on smaller projects that aligned with his values. He spent more time with Lily, coaching her soccer team and taking her fishing on weekends. Together, they planted a garden in the backyard, filling it with flowers and vegetables. Claire joined them, her hands caked with dirt as she taught Lily how to plant sunflower seeds. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together in the garden, Lily looked up at Claire with wide, hopeful eyes. "Can I call you Mom?" Claire froze, caught, off guard by the question. She glanced at Ethan, who offered an encouraging smile. Then she looked back at Lily, her heart swelling with emotion. "If you want to, sweetheart, I'd love that." Lily squealed with delight, throwing her arms around Claire's neck. "Yay. Now I really do have the best mom ever." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head fondly. "Well, I guess that settles it. From that day forward, Claire became mom to Lily, and the bond between them grew even stronger. They baked cookies, went shopping for dresses, and stayed up late giggling over silly jokes. To anyone who saw them, they looked like any other happy family. As summer approached, Ethan and Claire decided to make things official. One Saturday morning, they gathered their closest friends and family, including Mia and Alex, for a small ceremony in the backyard. The garden they'd planted together was in full bloom, vibrant colors framing the makeshift altar. Lily served as the flower girl, tossing petals with wild abandon as Claire walked down the aisle wearing a simple white dress. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan pulled Claire into a kiss, eliciting cheers and applause from their guests. Later, as they danced under twinkling string lights, Ethan whispered in her ear, "I love you." "I love you too," Claire replied, resting her head against his shoulder. More than words can say. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was theirs. Together they faced challenges, celebrated joys, and built a future rooted in love, trust, and resilience. As the camera panned out on their first dance, the screen faded to black, leaving viewers with a sense of hope and possibility. And somewhere, far away, Victor Monroe sat alone in his cell, staring at the wall, unable to comprehend how he'd lost everything to the daughter he once tried to destroy.